Good morning, everyone. Let's dive into this clusterfuck of a show known as Title Tuesday from AEW, live from Spokane, Washington. I'll be real with you, I didn't even bother watching the main event, and I'm right there with the majority of the internet when I say this was a god-awful show. First off, booking 3 special shows in a row? What the hell were they thinking? It's clear the quality has taken a nosedive, and it feels like they just threw a bunch of random ideas together for matches without any coherent thought. We kicked off the month with AEW Grand Slam at Arthur Stadium on September 25th, which was a knockout, followed by the October 1st anniversary show that was filled with forgettable matches. Don't even get me started on that controversial Will Ospreay versus Ricochet match that left folks scratching their heads. Should have saved that for All In, the WrestleMania of AEW. And then we had Konosuke Takeshita interfering, adding to the chaos, while critics labeled that match a gymnastics exhibition. Now, Title Tuesday had a couple of bright spots, like Darby Allin and Will Ospreay cutting some solid promos, and they announced some interesting matches, like Jay White versus Adam Page. But let's be honest, most of the matches felt utterly forgettable and didn't fit the Title Tuesday stipulation. When you think of a night like this, you expect something akin to WWE's Night of Champions, where titles are on the line. What do we get instead? Mercedes Moné defending her Japanese title and TBS title against Emi Sakura, a name that most fans don't even recognize, without any build or story leading up to it. This isn't meant to sound xenophobic, but you can't just have an international wrestler challenge for a title without giving the audience a reason to care. Who the hell is Emi Sakura, anyway? And then the main event was a tag match featuring 4 title holders. But guess what? No titles on the line. Sure, it sets up the upcoming pay-per-view with Bryan Danielson and Wheeler Yuta versus Pac and Claudio Castagnoli, but it doesn't scream Title Tuesday. They could have given us Danielson versus Castagnoli instead, or a babyface showdown with Yuta challenging for a title. That would have made so much more sense. Let's talk about the women's division for a second. We had Britt Baker versus Willow Nightingale set for a contender spot against Mariah May, which made sense. But suddenly, we're treated to a fatal 4-way with no clear explanation for Britt's absence. Look, I get that emergencies happen, but why throw in Nyla Rose and Jamie Hayter for the sake of it? I was pleasantly surprised Willow came out on top, given that Jamie just returned from injury. Willow's been putting in the work and deserved this shot after her feud with Mariah May. Now, let's touch on the poor advertising. I get that they had to move Title Tuesday to avoid clashing with hockey, but come on. They're competing against WWE NXT on the same night. This was their chance to hit it out of the park. According to WrestleTix, they still had over 900 tickets to sell for their Tacoma Dome pay-per-view, which is just embarrassing. AEW keeps tarping off sections because they can't fill venues to capacity, just like at Grand Slam, where they set up for 8,000 in a 16,000-seat stadium. If they had a killer show, they might have been able to convince the Tacoma Dome to open up all 21,000 seats. Imagine selling out that venue, second biggest crowd of the year behind Wembley Stadium. Great television is key, folks. They can't keep throwing special shows at us without any compelling storylines or memorable matches in between. Sure, the Moxley faction and Danielson-Yuta angle are decent, but everything else feels lackluster. So here's hoping they step up their game and create shows that actually matter. Title Tuesday should feel like a night of champions, not just a random mishmash of matches with no stakes. And for the love of all that's holy, can they at least make sure we know who the challengers are? Who the hell is Emi Sakura, anyway? The show opened with Jon Moxley cutting a promo about Bryan Danielson, and while I understand the intent behind his cryptic style, it often comes off as overly convoluted. Moxley's rambling can feel confusing, almost like a poor man's Bray Wyatt. There's an effort to create ambiguity, but when it's done repeatedly without clear direction, it just muddles the storyline. You're left wondering if Moxley will even beat Danielson for the title, or if we'll see interference from Shane McMahon or Bobby Lashley. It's meant to build suspense, but it risks losing the audience in the process. After the opening pyro, we saw Darby Allin cutting a promo with Brody King. I appreciate Darby's energy. He really channels that youthful enthusiasm, reminiscent of a young Jeff Hardy. However, there's a fine line between high energy and coming off as overly eager. Sometimes, it feels like he's trying too hard, which can detract from the authenticity of his message. Brody King, on the other hand, seemed sidelined in the promo, and that's a missed opportunity. Given his imposing stature, you'd expect him to dominate the conversation. Instead, he felt like an afterthought. If they're building a hardcore match between these two, they need to establish a stronger conflict and give Brody more opportunities to showcase his character. As for Brody King, he's at risk of falling into that unfortunate category of big man who loses all the time. If he can't gain some momentum and pick up a win, it'll only further dilute his character. It's all about realism. Darby may be a smaller competitor, but his victories shouldn't come at the expense of making Brody look weak. The dynamic between them needs to be more balanced, especially if they're hinting at a future title run for Darby. Then we had the meeting with Jake the Snake Roberts and Don Callis discussing Lance Archer. I'm concerned about this pairing. Jake hasn't been on TV regularly, so it's puzzling to see him take on another wrestler without a consistent presence. If anything, this might be a way to transition Archer away from Roberts entirely. Don Callis could bring a fresh perspective to Archer's character, especially as he's a larger competitor with a strong international presence. Callis's family needs to be more prominent in AEW, and if they can cultivate that faction into something impactful, it could set the stage for some intriguing storylines. Speaking of announcements, it's baffling that AEW dropped the news of their all-wrestling Collision show with little to no promotion. They need to market these events better, especially with a pay-per-view looming. A go-home show should be treated as a significant moment to ramp up excitement, and if they don't put in the effort to advertise, they're missing a prime opportunity to engage the audience. On a positive note, I appreciate that they started the show with a series of promos instead of a lengthy match. It's refreshing to see character development take precedence for a change, and I hope they continue to build on this trend moving forward. AEW has the talent and the potential to create compelling narratives. They just need to fine-tune their execution. Overall, Title Tuesday had its highlights, but there are clearly areas needing improvement. I'm rooting for AEW to step up their game as they head into the pay-per-view, and I hope they can create a more cohesive and engaging product that resonates with fans. Commander versus Hologram. First off, I'm relieved that the show didn't kick off with a 30-minute match of monotony. But seriously, why the hell should I care about this matchup? This guy always wins, while Commander seems to be a perpetual jobber. The match was filled with counters and flips off of each other, and I'll admit, Hologram hit a tilt-a-whirl Hurricane Rana that looked decent. But come on, why the hell is Jeff Jarrett on commentary? Is this leading to a Hologram match at WrestleDream? I'd rather see Ricochet face Hologram instead of this continuous cringe fest. The pacing felt repetitive, jumping from slow to fast like a damn broken record. Commander went for a top rope walk into a dive, but Hologram countered with a Hurricane Rana. Then in a surprising turn, Commander caught him and hit an awesome powerbomb. But of course, Hologram won with an airplane spin into a powerbomb. Classic. Now we've got Jake the Snake Roberts trying to wrangle together Rush, Mortos, and Dralistico. What a clusterfuck. These luchadors haven't done a promo, and they're known for jobbing too much. This whole thing feels like a desperate attempt to create a faction that nobody asked for. Also, it's going to be a weird dynamic because Jake the Snake Roberts is not on television a lot, so he really has to be there to manage these wrestlers. The other thing is that I don't remember any promo from these wrestlers speaking in English. So how are they going to become a new faction in All Elite Wrestling, where the Dynamite show and Collision has a majority English-speaking audience? And it's going to look a little weird to see Jake the Snake Roberts speak for them when they can't speak English that well, because that's going to look a little stupid. Usually when you have a manager in charge of saying something along with their wrestlers underneath them. Or else it comes off like a slave owner speaking for their slave. Next up, Mark Briscoe says he's going to hurt Chris Jericho. This backstage segment is a total letdown. It is just Mark Briscoe being interviewed and speaking to the camera. Where is Chris Jericho? Why the hell can't we hear him and Chris Jericho on the mic in the ring? Briscoe has the charisma and voice that could sell a match, and if AEW isn't utilizing that, he should jump ship to WWE. Daniel Garcia comes out and talks about sticking with AEW and winning gold. I dig it, but why wasn't this hyped before the show? Garcia needs a solid match at WrestleDream, and how about putting him up against Okada? That would be a killer underdog versus veteran match. Mercedes Moné is interviewed about her match against Emi Sakura. She mentions Sakura has been wrestling longer than she's been alive, which, let's be real, sounds like a stretch. If they want to establish a threat, why didn't they show a highlight reel of Sakura like they did with Forbidden Door? Who the hell is Emi? Just a random Japanese wrestler thrown into the mix. There's no way I buy that Sakura has a chance against someone like Moné, who's got all the glam and pageantry. This show is feeling painfully predictable. Willow Nightingale versus Jamie Hayter versus Neela Rose versus Paige. Now what the hell happened to the original match of Dr. Britt Baker versus Willow Nightingale? This four-way match feels like a half-baked idea thrown together last minute, and it's a shame because Willow deserves more. If Baker had faced Nightingale, you'd think AEW would let Willow shine. 10 minutes in and they're bringing in chairs like it's a damn backyard brawl. Interferences are flying and Jamie Hayter chases Penelope Ford out of the arena? Really? Wouldn't the title be more important to her? Logic hole alert. In a chaotic finish, Willow puts Paige through a table with a fallaway slam and gets the pinfall. At least they stuck with the original plan somewhat. Jay White versus Jobber. Jay White takes over 5 minutes to beat a jobber, way too long for a former IWGP champion and NJPW Grand Slam champion. He declares he's going after Adam Page in the AEW championship, and at least he sounded emphatic on the mic. There's a segment where Hook is trying to find out who assaulted his father. Why the hell do we need Chris Sabian in this? It adds unnecessary comic relief. But Christian Cage talking to Hook could set up an interesting match between them. Something fresh would be nice. Backstage with Willow and Mariah May. Finally, we see Willow Nightingale discussing her championship aspirations, and then it pans to Mariah May on the ground. This doesn't do May any favors. She looks weak and pathetic, overly selling her injury like it's a cartoon. This whole segment just feels off, and Mariah May really needs to know when to cut the shit on the starlet diva gimmick. You are facing Willow Nightingale, and please act like it. This is not you versus Toni Storm. Mercedes Moné versus Emi Sakura. I'm not really invested in this match because we already know how it's probably going to end. AEW has done nothing to establish Emi Sakura as a credible threat to Mercedes Moné. Why should I care about her? What has she done to earn a title shot in this winner-takes-all scenario? Shouldn't there be some kind of merit system where wrestlers need to win a few matches on TV to qualify for a title shot? This feels like a big mess, and it's hard to buy into a match featuring a wrestler that the audience knows little about. Mercedes Moné wins with a submission hold, and it's predictable who's going to win this. Then we have this confusing moment where Mercedes is a heel, and so is her bodyguard, Camille. Chris Statlander comes down to attack Camille, seemingly turning babyface without any proper build-up. This whole scenario is a bit of a jumbled mess. What's the motivation here? Will Ospreay and Don Callis segment. Now onto the Will Ospreay and Don Callis segment, which was arguably the best part of the night. This segment effectively puts both characters into a storyline that makes sense. Ospreay was a babyface in the Don Callis family, surrounded by a bunch of heels, so there needed to be a separation. The reveal that Don sent Takeshita out during the Ospreay versus Ricochet match to punish Ospreay for not winning the tag match at Grand Slam adds depth. Ospreay's reluctance to use a screwdriver weapon and his Tiger Driver finisher shows his character's moral compass, but Don Callis sees him as weak for not having that killer instinct. Their conflict is compelling, and the introduction of Kyle Fletcher, who has history with Ospreay, creates an intriguing dynamic. I'm genuinely interested in the upcoming match between Ospreay, Ricochet, and Takeshita. Main event, Bryan Danielson and Wheeler Yuta versus Claudio and Pac. Unfortunately, I fell asleep during this match. I can't say it was captivating for me, but I'll admit I was working a graveyard shift, then flew from Hartford to Denver to Wyoming. After a whirlwind trip, I'm heading to Seattle this Friday for the Wrestle Dream show, where I'll be in the front row, so that's something to look forward to. I'm pleased with the Wrestle Dream match card this year. It feels much more cohesive than last year's Wrestle Dream show, which felt like a Forbidden Door Part 2, which was filled with Japanese wrestlers without any significant storyline build-up. This year, there's a better focus on AEW talent and established storylines, which is refreshing. On my scoring card, I'd give the show a D-. It felt like many matches didn't fit the title stipulation format. Plus, featuring lesser-known wrestlers like Emi Sakura in high-stakes scenarios is a tough sell. It's essential to have title changes or at least the feeling that something significant is on the line during a show like this. I appreciate talents like Darby Allin, Jay White, Will Ospreay, and Willow Nightingale for their contributions. I also commend Daniel Garcia for his character transformation. He's no longer just a crybaby, he's stepping up and taking himself seriously, which is great to see. His potential rivalry with Jack Perry could be a compelling story to watch unfold. Lastly, AEW should reconsider the approach to back-to-back special stipulation shows for ratings. Making Grand Slam a pay-per-view is a step in the right direction. They need to find a balance and avoid creating clusterfucks that confuse the audience. Having a show where every title is on the line right before a pay-per-view can muddy the waters for upcoming matches that you already have on the card.